Alright, good afternoon everybody once again. One thing I can't do is I can't sit down and make a presentation. Okay, probably, yeah, that's an unlearning which I have. How many of you here are not connected to knowledge management? Wonderful, at least there's one person in the room. Okay, I mean, in a sense, what do you do?
So I'm basically a transactional lawyer.
Okay.
I do a lot of transactions, and I've recently joined KM. I'm assisting Gopali.
Oh, you also joined the bandwagon.
I'm not here for like the full
Okay,
run.
good. You are a new entrant.
Yeah.
So the reason why I asked this question was, okay, how many of you in this room have attended a conference, a talk, which you have no clue what it is about? I think that's the first. Most of us are very comfortable. I mean, if there is a knowledge management conference happening, even if it is on the 8th page in a small column on the newspaper, my eyes somehow look for it. Okay? I somehow manage to pay for that conference or whatever and go for the conference. But if it is a pharmaceutical conference, or if the conference is about automobiles, I won't go there. He just spoke that knowledge grows at the edges. When combination happens between one domain and another domain, do we really make an effort? Why? Because we went to schools. Somebody said I was born intelligent, then I went to a school. No, that's exactly what happens. Because when you went to school, you had to pick up a stream. Are you a science graduate? Are you a commerce graduate? Are you an arts graduate? If you are a science graduate or a technical graduate, God forbid, the last literature book you read was probably in your plus 2. That's it. Literature doesn't matter to me. There are no emotions in my life. Same thing happens with any of the technical education. There are people in this world. One of them is mentioned in John Seeley Brown's book, The Power of Pull. He makes it a point to attend a conference, a 3-day or a 4-day conference, twice in a year. And his condition is, that should be a conference which I should have no clue what it is about. And this great gentleman is a banker. He went and sat in a conference which was happening about the environmental awareness or what is happening with the environment today. He says first day it was all jargon. The next day it was he walked around the corridors making friends, collecting visiting cards, saying, can I get in touch with you? The third day, when he sat in the conference, he started applying his banking knowledge to environment. And what was the outcome? Carbon currency. Today what we talk about carbon currency was because a banker decided to be uncomfortable with the situation. We need engineers to be uncomfortable with situations. We need lawyers to be uncomfortable with situations. Only then you would expect knowledge to grow or to you becoming knowledge. So, this is what it is. If you are in the wrong room, now is the place to run away. Okay. Alvin Toffler says, the illiterates of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, relearn, and unlearn. But then the question is, do we know what we need to unlearn in the first place? Do we really know that?
Everything. Whatever we have read in college.
Absolutely. Not only in college, whatever you have come across, whatever is the notions which is built inside you. You have to unlearn. Can you give me an example of something which you feel you need to unlearn? It can be anything, any walk of life. Go ahead, give it a try. And one more thing, let
It
me.
can be simple as brushing your teeth.
Absolutely. Have you tried it any other way? Unlearning a skill.
Or for that matter, generally we feel that you learn from, meaning my kid has to learn from me. Come on, I learn more from
Absolutely.
her because
That's what they say.
she is more childlike and natural than what we have become
Wonderful
over the
people.
years.
In fact, they say that you teach children skills and they teach you life. I mean, that's a fact.
So actually there's a lot of innovation in when the child does a particular task, because they think differently. And if what we do is we try to sort of guide them and say you should do it this way.
Exactly.
So as the
That's
child
true.
grows, then they start thinking only in that way.
In fact, somebody was telling me like, it's got no gender bias to it, but somebody said, if Columbus was married, he would not have discovered America. Said, why? Because then his wife would have told him, where are you going? What time are you coming back? Okay. Is it always that you only have to go scan somebody else, go and do this for you? And this is what parents do at the end of the day. Can you see this? Can you count the number of F's? Guys, fast. How many? 3? Who counted 5? Okay. 3? 4? That was enough time, I guess. There were actually 6 of them. Why? You did not look at the ops, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Because my mind just read the sentence and
So now do you understand unlearning?
Yes.
Without knowing, knowingly or unknowingly. Okay? This is what the mind does to you. So I'm not going to talk at length about innovation. But yes, at this point of time, at any point during the discussion, you can ask a question. You're not going to break my thought. Okay? We can always come back. So, stop me wherever you feel like, ask a question. What comes to your mind? Tsunami. What else? Toblerone. Okay. What else?
Nachos.
Nachos. Okay. Are we people hungry? What else? Nobody's seeing anything. But if you really look at it hard, it says Paris in the spring. The articles are repeated everywhere. Once in a lifetime. Bird in the hands. This is exactly what we call as cognitive limitation. Your education did not teach you this. They taught you the same alphabets and the same sentences, the same words. But somewhere on the line, you picked up this baggage. So what you need to unlearn is the baggage what you picked up. Not whatever we have learned. Along with this learning, there was a lot of noise. And we somehow got so used to the noise that we enjoy the noise and take it along with us. The basic finding of cognitive psychology is that people have no conscious experience of most of what happens in the human mind. We just do it. How do we get over this? But before that, so Herbert Simon first advanced the concept of bounded or limited rationality. He was a Nobel laureate. Because of the limits in human mental capacity, the mind cannot cope directly with the complexity of the world. Rather, we construct a simplified mental model of reality and then work with this model. We behave rationally within the confines of our mental model, but this model is not always well adapted to the requirements of the real world. So we cannot deal with the complexities. So we make some things constant, create a smaller world, and with whatever we have learned and the noise which we have along the way, we try to modify things and come to a conclusion. No wonder when you take the KM to your top management, what is the first thing they ask you? Where is the money, honey?
What is the value?
What is that?
What is the ROI?
Right.
How much of, then how do you calculate? You go back and you being an experienced KM professional will start using the same Excel sheet to calculate the ROI. Please understand, knowledge is a different asset altogether. This is the only asset which actually multiplies when you share. Every other known asset till date, if I have an apple and you have an orange, I give you the apple, you give me the orange, I go back with an orange, you go back with an apple. But if you have an idea and I have an idea, you give me the idea, I give you my idea, I go back with 2 ideas and you go back with 2 ideas. So this is the only asset which multiplies when shared, while all the other known assets till now diminish when shared. But then, what is the denominator? The denominator is another depletable resource called time. That is our return on investment. So you will start measuring this asset also by saying how much of time does it take. So in turns, how much of money does it make? Doesn't work. Don't measure KM till you come out with the right measure, because your known measures are wrong. Second unlearning. Mindsets are quick to form, but resistant to change. Do you see this picture here? There was a classic experiment which was conducted. If you look at the first one, it looks like a man. If you look at the last one, it looks like a woman. For somebody who was shown this picture or this picture, the group said 50% said it's a man, 50% said it's a woman. But when the sequence was changed, that is when people were shown from this end, they had to come till here to recognize that it's a woman. And if they were shown the pictures from this end, they had to come till here to say that it is a man. Which means to say, if you have a preset notion in your mind, to take that out and put a new idea into you, I will have to provide you with more data than what I would do for a clean slate. And this is why you go back to your board again and again saying that KM works, KM works, KM works. But they come from either project management experience or a technology experience. So don't get frustrated. In the real KM world, what is required is true persistence and your ability to give more and more data, more and more examples of how it has worked and a very innovative way of doing it. You will have to do all tactical innovations. KM is the most innovative field if you really look at it. Because even to sell KM, you have to be very, very innovative. One of the things which I have done in my experience, we generally talk about KM champions. So the first question is, so what am I supposed to do? My boss told me to become a champion. Okay, I am an SPOC and I don't get paid for doing this particular job.
Either included in KRS.
Yeah, it's not even included in KRS. Okay. First of all, he doesn't understand why he is doing what he is doing. Second, he doesn't know what he should be doing. How do you expect a result out of it. Is ready to take in people who are saying no to a lot of things, challenge them. So what we did was we ran posters. We replaced the faces. I mean, if you look at a classic Lagan poster, it's a bunch of 11 people standing. You replace their faces by the photos of your own SPOCs and champions. Give them an identity. Let them feel the 5 P's of ethical management. Let them see the purpose. Let them be passionate about that purpose. And once you have the purpose and the passion, the third comes perseverance, persistence, and perspective. So a KM champion or somebody who's doing knowledge management in an organization needs to imbibe all these characters in him. Give them an identity. That was just one of those examples. So it's difficult to look at the same information from different perspectives. One of the most difficult mental feats is to take a familiar body of data and reorganize it visually or mentally to perceive it from a different perspective. Many of you must have seen this classic example. How many actually see it? What do you see? A young woman and an old woman? So how difficult is it? How difficult was it the first time when you saw this? Why?
Because we don't look for multiple views.
Absolutely, absolutely. So once you arrive at something, that's it, it sticks on. So this is another an example of bias. A simple experiment was conducted where things like dogs standing on a lawn, a clover bridge, or a fire hydrant, they were initially projected as very blurred images. For those who started viewing the pictures when they were most out of focus, had more difficulty identifying them when they actually became clearer than those who started viewing at a less blurred stage. In other words, greater the initial blur, the clearer the picture had to be before people could recognize it. So much for experience. We talk so much about knowledge management being experience. Let us get the experience of all the people, or our most experienced people are the experts in the domain. But what really happens? The expert has his own biases. That's why we require this young blood. Second, the longer people were exposed to a blurred picture, the clearer the picture had to be before they could recognize it. So, when do you understand that you need to unlearn? So, what feeling do you get? The first thing is, you will feel anger, grief, excitement. How many people actually get excited by a new idea? You take a great idea, you didn't sleep because you got an idea. You said, this is what we can do. You take it to your boss, what happens? No, what really happens? So one of the most important things as bosses is, you have to cultivate the habit of getting excited about an idea. It does not mean, I'm not saying fake it. It's easy. For that, you need to go back to the childlike behavior. Right or wrong, that's a different issue. Let's get excited about the idea. We spoke so much about Google. If you really look at the way Google Books came out, what was the idea? Larry Page says, let's take all the knowledge in the world. We have the high-speed scanner which we have developed. This high-speed scanner was developed by Sergey in the 20% of the Google time. So they have this classic 80% for time and 20% is your time. So in that 20% of the time he developed a high-speed scanner, and now he had to utilize that high-speed scanner. So they decided, let's take all the books in the world and just scan it and put it on the web. Great. So two similar guys, it's very easy to excite guys like that. So both of them got excited. So then they call up Al Gore. Al Gore was in a helicopter. He could not hear properly. They says, we need your permission to scan all the books in the American Congress Library. He could not hear them properly. He says, yes, go ahead. They go without even understanding the fact that there is something like a copyright. They had to pick, they just threw that into thin air. But then sometimes you have to challenge everything. So they decided, finally they came out with that solution of taking out one page here and there, or making the entire book not being available, but most of the book being available. But if they had thought about all these things in the initial stages, would Google Books have been possible? Okay? So, why do we need to unlearn? Let me ask that question again. Yes, all said and cognitive bias, so be it. They have lived with us for such a long time, why? What is the problem? See, everything has one thing in common. If you look at all the words which are used today, innovation, knowledge management, unlearning, growth, One thing which is constantly hovering behind this is change. Do we understand change? How well do we understand change? Let's look at a small Now, do I hear you take a lot of breath? Do you understand what we are talking about? Do you understand the magnitude of what we are talking about? Why is this happening? So some of the most phenomenal things we need to learn or unlearn. Einstein somewhere says that one of the most powerful forces on this planet is compound. What does it mean? What does compounding mean to you? Have you heard of this classic example? I'll give you 1,000 rupees every day for the next 30 days. Or I will give you 100 rupees today and go on doubling it for the next 30 days. Which would you prefer? Which would you prefer? So what does it mean? Let's look at this example. There are water lilies cut in a certain lake. All of you imagine water lily in a lake. This doubles in every 24 hours. From the time the first water lily appears until the lake is completely covered, it takes 30 days. So on what day is the lake half covered? It looks like a very simple problem, but look at the complexity of this problem. There is one water lily today. Okay? On 20th day, what percentage of the pond is covered? Any guesses?
25%.
It's about 0.1%. On 20th day, just 0.1% of the lake is covered. On 25th day, it's about 3%. Okay? On 29th day, 50%. And suddenly, boom, on the 30th day, you have the entire lake full. This is exactly what happens in social media. Why was Facebook able to achieve that in 2 years, which the previous technologies were not able to do it? The spectacle, what you see here, took 400 years for the market to adapt it. 400 years after the first invention. But Facebook takes 2 years to get to the first 50 million. This is the power of compounding. So if somebody is doubting your knowledge management capabilities today, saying there are only 10 users, what is the use? Please remind him, you won't realize this till the 29th day. This is the power of compounding, and that's the first thing you need to unlearn. Because without compounding I don't need to understand compounding. But if you look at the way it leaps, and this is what you saw in change. This is the most powerful concept. So, think of it as economic opportunity. When the mobile phones came in, whoever expected that there is going to be a compounded growth in mobile phones? I still remember the day when I paid 32 rupees for an incoming call. Can you beat that? It was a brick size phone. Okay? And you could kill somebody with it. And 32 rupees for an incoming call. Today what is it? Almost free. So economics has changed. That is, your thought of economics here should change. That is the first thing you need to unlearn. Today, my generation does not believe in free. The moment somebody says something is free, what is your first thought? Come on, there should be a tag, something behind this. How can somebody give free? But how many of you have enrolled for courses on Coursera? Coursera.org. They offer some of the best possible courses. MIT has completely put out all its courses free of cost if you just want to enroll. The difference is MIT, you don't get a certificate. Coursera, you also get a certificate for completion of the course. And what weird courses? Network Life. Okay. From that to photography to how to be a better mom, you have all possible courses available free of cost. Are you still thinking, so what are they going to get out of it? MOCCs is a big thing today. Okay? So that's the acronym which is used for free courses. You have Udemy, You have Coursera. In fact, today somebody was talking about Alistair University, something like that. Everything is free.
Even Howard is based.
Howard is talking. So why are they doing it? Because your concept of economics has changed. How has it changed? There's a wonderful course by one of the universities. It is called Design Thinking. What you have to do in that course is they'll give you a set of, the instructor is giving you a set of design concepts and a teaching on the course. Everybody who has taken the course will have to participate in the forum, review the ideas given by the other people in the course. There are about 6,000 people in that course. Just imagine the learning the university or the professor is getting out of a participation of 6,000 people. So what does this tell us? Our concept of economics we need to unlearn immediately. What is the next thing? Have you heard of, what is this? Which is the tallest mountain in this world? It's not the Everest. It's Mauna Kea. It's over 10,000 meters, or it's double the size of Mount Everest. Proverbially, the only problem is you can see only the top 1/10 of it. This is exactly what is the problem with our explicit knowledge. We expect people to write documents about all their experiences, and we expect other people to read those documents and become as knowledgeable. Is it possible? I always give this example. How many of you can write the set of instructions to how to knot a tie? Simple task. How to knot a shoelace? How to tie a shoe? The best technical writers today find it very difficult to write down a simple thing like how to knot a tie. So do you expect the doctor to document all his skills and experiences and put it out so that another doctor learns from it? Difficult. If your organization is planning to manage documents and explicitly manage only explicit knowledge, please tell them very clearly you will get 1/10 of what is the ROI you are expecting. Because that's what you are managing. The paradox of knowledge is the moment you put knowledge on paper, it becomes information. It is no more knowledge. So that brings us back to this ever-evolving question of what is knowledge. Being in knowledge management, you will all have to answer this question at some point of time. What is it? What is that you are trying to manage? If you are talking about documentation, we learned that it is only about 10% of it. So what is knowledge? How do you experience it?
Experience and intuitions combined with knowing something.
Experience and intuition, stop. You are right. Where does this experience and intuition lie?
Within us.
People.
In people.
If you put any system in knowledge management by taking people out of it, it is simply not going to work. I give this classic example, probably this is the 100th time I am repeating this example, but I have learned one thing. Passion is all about saying the same thing again and again without getting bored. Okay. I ask this question everywhere I go. It says, okay, let's play a game. I have a box at home which is 5 feet tall, 4 feet wide and 3 feet deep. This box has a door to the front of it. Every time I open this door, it lights up. The temperature inside this box is less than the temperature outside. Any guesses? Refrigerator? Okay, great. What did I do now? I gave you pieces of data. What did you do? you took this data and interconnected with each other. It would not have mattered if I had changed the sequence in which I gave you the data. Your mind would have still made information out of it. Right? Then at some point of time it struck to you that it's a refrigerator. What if I was talking to a bunch of people who have never seen a refrigerator in their lives? Would they have guessed it? What if I was talking to a bunch of people who are refrigerator mechanics? What would they have said? They would have told me it's a 165 liter refrigerator. Front door, whatever. Now do you see the difference? The person who is living day in and out with a refrigerator says it's a 165 liter refrigerator. A person who uses a refrigerator says it's a refrigerator. A person who has never seen a refrigerator can never make a guess. This is knowledge. Looking at that information and making some sense out of which you got from your cognitive abilities and your experience. So if you take this person out of it, the entire system just remains a system. So if you put documents onto your net or in your intranet, or you paid through your nose for a document management system, implemented it, called it change management, and you are expecting it to give knowledge results, it's never going to happen. Because the realities are you need people to explain that. You need, because people only can give context, nobody else. So as far as your question was concerned that time, how do you get the right information to the right people? It doesn't solve the problem. You have to create the context, the same context between two people. Which means to say, if the knowledge is about troubleshooting a music system, and somebody has written a document, and all the other people in the organization who repair music systems are seeing it, they can do it. You have created the same context. So, to create those bunch of people, what all did you do? You did not just give them a document. You took them through a training, you inducted them into an organization and gave them the culture of troubleshooting, you taught them troubleshooting methodologies, you interviewed them in the first place, will they fit for the job? Are they a right fit for that kind of a job? After having done all that, you forgot all that and said, take this document and do it, you will be able to do it. No, you won't. You have to create the same context. Right information to the right person is possible only if both of them are in the right plane. If they are on disparate planes, it will not be possible to transfer knowledge. So behind every document, there needs to be a lot of work around people, process, cultures and technologies. So that is your proverbial 1/10 of explicit knowledge what you are managing. That is one thing you need to unlearn. Diversity and inclusion. How much of time do you think it took for Wikipedia to come out? Do you all agree Wikipedia is a great source? Any doubts? People express doubts in the initial stages. What if somebody comes and puts in? Okay. But today Wikipedia has established itself as the Encyclopedia Britannica. How much of time did it take for Wikipedia to be built? A few million hours. Looks big, isn't it? But if you really look at the statistics, what an average American spends on a weekend looking at the television commercials is more than what time it took to build Wikipedia. So as an organization, learn this. Don't ask your SPOCs or POCs to spend a lot of time in doing knowledge management jobs. Instead of that, make everybody do a small bit of a job. So shift from not small numbers for long periods, but large numbers for short periods. That's going to make your Wikipedia, that's going to build your knowledge-based system, and probably that complaint of what do I get out of this will be reduced. So people who contributed to the Wikipedia are not complaining today. Why are they complaining? Because they spent very small amount on their area of interest to do it, but lot of people got involved. So unlearn one more thing, which is I will appoint a champion, I will give him an incentive, I will put 5% of KRA on him, okay, and I will catch hold of his manager as a response. No, none of that works. Instead of that, split up the KM task into smaller and smaller and smaller bits and distribute it among your entire organization. That is going to give you the results what you are looking for. So what we unlearned? We unlearned 3 things today. What is the economy? We learned compounding. We learned education. What we think is KM. The most important thing, we learned inclusion. So no point in time invite only the SPOCs or the managers for a conference like this. Give it open to the entire conference. It's okay that if you have a 15 minutes of talk, that's it. But get everybody involved for shorter periods of time.
I have a question here.
Go ahead.
From your experience, is there any organization which has put this model into work, where they have actually split the KM task among all the people in the organization, and where there is no spot, but everybody is doing a bit of KM?
Selmi has done it. I think there's a wonderful book also written, and otherwise I'll pass on the contact to you if you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Okay? They have done, it's an insurance company, but the entire organization thinks that is their responsibility. Okay? Smaller bits of pieces. Okay? I have seen this working to some extent in Scandinavian countries. For example, Nokia is largely different culturally from Nokia Siemens. So if you look at, though that silos exist, that it has to be in Scandinavia, but there is a slightly better culture where they get excited a lot. That is very important. You have to excite everybody in the organization. And there is another methodology to do that. So how do you capture that 2% to tip over the remaining 90%? So that's how it is. So much for unlearning. Any questions? So
unlearning means basically that I have to break my complacency, right?
Yes.
Because so long I am complacent.
All the time.
All the time.
The mindset.
Right.
Basically, you need to be comfortable with the fact that make me uncomfortable. Never go into, say, for example, if I am coming to talk to a bunch of people, actually today I have reached a stage where I am extremely comfortable when you ask the most uncomfortable questions. Push me, that's what I tell people. Push me, ask those uncomfortable questions. Make me uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with it.
So if I ask you to sit down and give the presentation,
It will be uncomfortable, but if this was done plainly for my comfort level. Like I said, that's an unlearning which I have to do.
It's a good one.
But I have to do it sometimes. What happens is they are beaming. I am alone in the room. Oh yeah, by the way, I have to tell you this. I don't do this when I am alone in the room.
So basically, one has to move away from their comfort zone. That is.
How much you can feel uncomfortable, and how much you are. See, there are a lot of things which happens to your mind. You feel bored. You basically feel bored. Then you will feel, why am I doing this? I don't understand anything of this. But that's exactly what you have to go through. So you have to practice that, imbibe that in you. That, okay, pharmaceutical conference now, let's go and sit. It's about agriculture, let's go and sit.
But normal behavior of people is that, they come even for a conference, they're sponsored by their organization. And when they come and you talk to them, this is what, it has not added any value to me. That is the impression they will
Correct.
say.
You've come with a
But,
different perspective.
but what I tell them is that even if it has given you 10% learning, I think you have achieved what you wanted. Because
No, I
it's
think-
not that you have come with an expectation that 100% it should match with what you want, but it doesn't.
See, generally what happens is, I keep saying, value is not equal to price.
Hmm.
The price what you pay for the conference is not the value. It's about, value is a very intrinsic thing. What you value this versus what I value this will be totally different.
It's a value system, basically.
So, without delving much, just to add on to where the innovation talk stop, I just want to tell you one more thing. If you look at innovation as such, innovation always happens on the next curve. What do you mean by that? We always hear this. Innovation happens on the next curve. That means if you get used to thinking something, you will not be able to innovate. The more and more expertise you gain, the more and more tunneling you will have done to yourself. A classic example is this. ICE 1.0. Where were people buying ice long ago? Antarctica. So there were people who were harvesters. There is people who lived in the Antarctic region used to cut ice and sell it to the world. What did they think? Operational excellence. They said, today I am cutting 10 feet of ice, tomorrow if I can cut 11 by using the latest technologies so possible. And if I can do a great supply chain management, that is if I can do a great packing on this and sell it, I will be doing a 10% incremental growth on this. While this fellow was doing it, somebody else was actually thinking of an ice factory. Ice factories did not come out of the people who were cutting and selling ice. Understand this. Ice factory was done by totally different fellow. He started making ice. He started freezing water in a factory setup. What was he thinking? How much more profitable can I be? How can I use the best labor possible? Where can I hire the cheapest labor? In the meantime, somebody else was inventing a refrigerator. So, innovation will not happen on this curve. If your organization is an expert in one particular area, please do not expect a great innovation to happen in that particular area itself. You may be an expert, you may come out with a great innovation in some other curve. Or somebody else out there will come and destroy whatever you have done. So, and see, there were organizations which were making whips. They procured the cheapest possible leather from the best possible source. They had master weavers and tailors. So these master weavers and tailors were able to make a whip in no time and the best quality whip. But when they came out, they realized there are no more horses to flog. What will you do with the whip? So it's very important that you keep your ear to the ground to understand changes which are happening in the industry, and please remember this, that innovation will not happen on a curve. So if you want innovation to happen, move your people. Like I said before, take your finance guy and put them for a month in software development and see what comes out. And that's exactly what is happening today. Today, we talk about the age of reverse innovation. They say the next 10 years will be the age of reverse innovation. What is this reverse innovation? See, if you traditionally look at the market or how the industries have functioned, if there are 7 billion people in this world, it has been split into 1 billion people who can afford, and the rest 6 billion who live on charity. So no goods which is made by an industrially profit-making organization is actually made for the 6 billion people. The assumption was that an ECG machine which costs $50,000 has to be invented by GE for America. For some reason they did not understand that these 6 million also suffer from heart attacks. No, it was for that affordable 1 billion people. But what happened? Then the 6 billion people were left out. What did these 6 billion people need? These 6 billion people also needed an ECG machine, but they could not afford something which costs $50,000. And have you seen a GE $50,000 machine? It's the size of this podium. You can't carry it. The problems of the 6 billion are different. The problems of this 6 billion are that 6 billion can't go to this ECG machine. They want the doctor to come home. Tell me, today also the situation in India is a doctor has to go to rural India. The rural India won't come to the doctor. And if the cost of an ECG operation is 50 times his daily earnings, why would he be even interested? He would say, I would rather die than get an ECG done for myself. So you have to radically produce something which works in $500. You need to do a lot of unlearning for this. You cannot take a $50,000 machine, strip it of all the things and say, okay, one line is sufficient, or I'll give you an ECG machine with $500, which only tells you if the left side of the heart is working or not. You can't do that. So what did GE do? GE set up their innovation center in India. They hired people from different walks of life to understand what is the reality of the country here. What they came out with that was, I need an ECG machine which I can carry like a laptop. I need an ECG machine which can work on batteries because in rural India there is no power. And I don't need an ECG machine which comes with a 600-page manual which can be done by an expert, because this came with a 600-page manual. So all I needed was two buttons, one to start, one to stop. It has to be done by anybody, a technician. These were the realities of the field. So when they got back to GE, the human mind is amazingly capable. So they came back with a machine, it changed the entire thing of an ECG machine. It looked like a laptop. Okay? How many of you have seen that machine? It's a small machine which is plugged into this one. $500. Now it becomes affordable. Now, how many? Because this is a huge market. They make money at the bottom of the pyramid by selling it at such low cost. Cost of ECG today? Probably 80 or 100 rupees or 200 rupees. Lot of people can afford it. That is the way the innovation will take place in the future. So if you go to Thailand, you will find a Dr. N who makes what we call as the Jaipur legs here. He made an elephant leg for $30, which costs $22. A human leg made in US by using titanium costs $22,000. But what he did cost less than $20. It is made out of recycled cups. Works perfectly well. Give more for less. That's the philosophy. So you can see this multiple examples. In fact, V. Govindarajan wrote a book called Reverse Innovation, in which he mentions that he makes a wonderful house which is being built in Bali and Hawaii at $300. This house has every possible facility. It has solar facility in it. It has solar lighting, solar heating, complete mosquito net around it, because a lot of people, poor people, are prone to contact malaria and that kind of thing. Possibilities. So innovation is all about seeing those possibilities. It's not about reducing the cost. It's about seeing the possibilities in the realities. And if I can predict, India will be the hub for a lot of Western companies today, because they need to reach out to these 6 billion. And that's where probably the innovation is going to go.
A lot of process innovation has been done in the medical area by
Yep.
Narayan
Vidyalaya is doing it.
Arvind Eye Clinic.
Arvind is doing it. Yes.
They have used what they do in operations, they have used as a concept in
Absolutely. And second thing, understand this, innovation is not about coming out with a new product. Business model innovation is actually more important than technology innovations. Technology innovations will happen, but business model innovation is the most important thing. Lot of people think that an Apple iPad or an iPod was a technology innovation. No doubt it was a technology innovation. But more importantly, an iPod's ability to split up the music royalty to the musician and involving them in the process and getting the entire thing done out of places like China and Thailand, they were the defining factors for the success of it. Earlier to that, Apple made everything, including cables. They made everything. But there was a paradigm shift which happened when Steve joins back, and then you can see a lot of things, 90% of Apple, the iPod being built outside. So business model innovation is important. Last slide, do we have the time? I'll take about 5 minutes. Any organization relies on only one of these programs. It is impossible for an organization to do all these four. Customer intimacy, what does it mean? What comes to your mind when you think of customer intimacy? Which organization? Southwest Airline? Have you heard of Southwest Airline? The only profit-making airline in all times, in terms of recession, everything. Their complete focus is on innovating around customer intimacy. It's not customer satisfaction, it's customer intimacy. There are stories which are available on the intranet of Southwest, which talks about what they did for the customer. For example, a customer came with a dog to board a flight. You know, dogs are not allowed. What would have happened if he was boarding any other flight? Sorry sir, you can't get the dog inside. But a Southwest Airline employee who is a dog lover comes forward and says, I'll take care of your dog till you come back. Do you think the customer is going to change the airline? An old woman is traveling. One of the crew members who is going on a holiday takes a detour, drops her home and then goes on a holiday. These are the kind of things which they go to any extent to be intimate with the customer. What you have to see here is, how is their organization structured? The organization structure in customer intimacy companies will be lot of empowerment at the edges where they meet the customer. Suppose I have a ticket to fly back to Bangalore at 9 o'clock. I finished the meet at 6 o'clock. I know there are 2 flights in the middle. What happens if I go to the airport and say, I need to go to Bangalore, I have a flight at 9 o'clock, why don't you prepone that to 6:30? What is the answer I get?
You have to pay so much.
For that I don't need to ask her, I know the process. I mean, I have to cancel this ticket, book a new ticket, yeah, that's a process, I mean, right? So she makes you believe that she does not have the ability to make that decision. But in Southwest, she can take that decision. If she finds that there is a flight which is going empty or which has got a place in it, she doesn't have to call up and say, I'll have to check with my higher up, nothing. Empowerment at the edge. So the organization structure is different. And everything flows into this. Product or service leadership, who comes to your mind? I mean, in fact, Steve makes a statement which is audacious in today's world, but he says customer doesn't know what he wants.
Yes, that's a very famous statement.
Okay? And they come out with a product every 6 months. Their entire focus is on R&D, innovation of the product or the service. The rest of the organization is only ancillary to this. No wonder you don't get a great service if you walk into an Apple store. If you walk into an Apple store, the fellow will not even get up from his chair and ask you what do you want. Oh, this is, the product sells for itself, so why do I need to do this? Employee capability. Lot of organizations invest a lot on their employees, especially consulting firms. They believe that employees are everything, they will bring in new businesses. Their organization structure is a lot more flatter. They tend to keep their employees for a longer period of time. So you don't have to, you don't have to wonder, oh man, this costs about 60,000 rupees to go to this conference. Will I be even able to think on those lines? Or is there a hierarchy in my organization that says up to 50,000 you can go, up to 20,000 somebody else can go? Operational excellence, organizations like GE. They hammer on operational excellence, immaterial of who you are. center brain with a lot of hands. The hands are supposed to just do what is being told. The problem is when organizations tries to shift from one to another, they slip. Classic example was an organization I worked with. AOL Time Warner was all about customers intimacy. They wanted to move away from charging a customer to make it, to move into product or service leadership, saying we have to come up with products. Look where they slip. So, be aware when you are doing an innovation also. Where do you want the innovation to be designed? Where do you want it to be happening? And what is the strategic strength of your organization? Depending on that, your innovation strategy will depend. So this is a busy slide, but generally tells you what happens in these kind of organizations. For example, core business process, organization structure, management system, and culture and mindset and behavior. What happens in these four kind of organizations? For example, if you look at culture of a customer intimacy company, there will be a relationship push. Flexibility and habit your way mindset. Emphasize complete solutions. Versus, if you were talking about customer equity measures like lifetime value and share of client, managing outcomes, I will share these slides so that I don't bug you with each and every intricate detail about this. Largely and lastly, so all your KM activities around innovation and learning and growth will depend on 9 things and 9 things only. You can't do anything beyond this. And those 9 things happen to be: how do you manage knowledge transfers between individuals? What do you do? How many cafes do you conduct? How many times have you connected people who come to you? Can you set up a KM help desk? Right information to the right people at the right time. May not be the right information, at least get to the point of right person to the right people at the right time. So can KM maintain a skills directly and set up a help desk, KM help desk, which has got a number which the entire organization can call and ask for help? Who has worked in this area? Because many a times it happens to be sensitive HR related data. So have this mandate to create an organization which can connect people and people. That is connecting knowledge transfers between individuals. Knowledge transfers from individuals to external structure. How many of your people are participating in open source communities? You even asked that question. So, how do you incentivize those kind of things for people to participate in those kind of things? Knowledge transfers from external structure to individual, bringing in external people into the organization and connecting them with each other. So, go beyond an organization chart. Probably I would say provide LinkedIn membership to all of your people. Paid LinkedIn membership so that you are connecting people to the external world. That could be an incentive program. Knowledge transfers from competence to internal structure. This is another important. I've used a term called competence. What does competence mean? Competence means your ability to get things done. It's not about just knowledge and skill. I may have the knowledge and the skill, but if I enter an organization on day one, I will not be able to do anything simply because I don't know who should I get in touch with for what. There is no competence. So, knowledge transfers from internal structure to individual competence. Finally, knowledge transfers within the external structure. So, how do you enable a K-Cafe where I takes a step back and sponsor the industry people to talk about, and you learn a lesson from there. Knowledge transfers from external to internal structure. How many journals do you subscribe for? What kind of explicit knowledge do you get? How many people do you sponsor for a training program? Knowledge transfers from internal to external structure, and finally knowledge transfers within the internal structure. When I say internal structure, I mean non-people, systems and things like that. Otherwise, I would have specifically used the term individual or. So at the end of the day, knowledge management is a simple thing. It only revolves around these 9 things. If you can measure and do. See, when it comes to measure, there are 2 kinds of measure. One is the efficiency measure and then the effectiveness measure. Efficiency measure is easy. So when I say efficiency measure, have you done it faster, cheaper, better? Have you done it within budget? Have you done? Don't try to measure the effectiveness. So just because you put 150 documents, are people using it? Have people learned a lesson? Don't know. But have you been able to do it? Effectiveness measure. So whenever you are signing up with the top management or the board for KM results, at least till you reach a maturity level, for the first 5 years, don't sign up for anything which measures the effectiveness. Only thing you are going to sign up is the efficiency measure. We are going to put a document management system in place. That's why your question about why technology becomes knowledge management is that because that's the easiest thing to implement. Because then I can say I have implemented SharePoint or not. But if you ask me, having implemented SharePoint, has it been effective? Our measures today are not sufficient. So after 5 years, you will get to a stage where you can conduct surveys or you can go for a make certification, and then that becomes a possibility. Questions? Finally, just leave this. There are 50 reasons not to change. If you want to add some more, add some more. We don't do that here. It's against tradition. Okay, there's no clear mandate. But okay. So, well, you can get in touch with me on this. I lead multiple lives basically. So, I'm very passionate mathematician. I'm very passionate knowledge management evangelist, and I also do a lot of use time music. So it keeps me busy. That's how it is. But yeah, you can get in touch with me. We can have conversations around all three of this at any point in time. Thanks.
Think that it will help the